Hello everyone, I'm Susan, and at 33, I recently faced one of the hardest choices I've ever had to make. Yet, it's led me to a much happier place. Let me share a bit about my journey, particularly about my relationship with my now ex-husband, Eric. We were introduced by mutual friends, instantly clicked, and soon started dating. Our relationship seemed almost too good to be true. We rarely argued and seemed to understand each other perfectly. After a year of being together, Eric thought it was time I met his mother. The meeting, expected to be a pleasant introduction, took an unexpected turn when Eric's mother asked about our relationship's duration and then, out of the blue, mentioned Elizabeth, Eric's high school and college sweetheart. According to Eric's mother, Elizabeth and Eric were a match made in heaven, raising the question of why they never married. The conversation shifted uncomfortably to comparisons between me and Elizabeth, from our careers, me being an accountant and Elizabeth pursuing a doctorate in world languages, to our personalities. Eric's mother even went as far as to declare Elizabeth would always be the daughter-in-law she preferred, indirectly implying I was merely a second choice or a backup. As the dinner progressed, Eric's mother made increasingly clear her preference for Elizabeth over me, suggesting that Eric and Elizabeth should reconsider their relationship. The tension reached a boiling point when I objected to being called a backup, and Eric sided with his mother, asking me to respect her despite the disrespectful suggestions and comparisons. This dinner revealed much more than I anticipated, not just about Eric's past, but about the respect and support I could expect in this family. It was a turning point, leading me to reconsider where my happiness and self-worth truly lay, ultimately guiding me to make one of the toughest yet most liberating decisions of my life. The whole situation left me absolutely stunned. I'd always heard tales of difficult in-laws, but never did I imagine being in a scenario where my partner's parent was actively working to reignite an old flame of his, especially with me in the picture. This was uncharted territory for me. Eric's behavior began to shift noticeably after that conversation with his mother, Betty. There were moments when I caught him browsing through Elizabeth's social media, contemplating whether to reconnect. When I addressed it, he brushed it off as mere curiosity and seemed to move past it, or so I thought. As time went on, I consciously avoided Betty. Every encounter with her meant enduring comparisons to Elizabeth and listening to updates about her, which inevitably stirred up trouble between Eric and me, trapping us in a repetitive cycle of upset, confrontation, and temporary resolution. Despite these challenges, when Eric proposed, my love for him overshadowed any doubts. I said yes, clinging to the hope that marriage might turn a new leaf for us. The wedding went smoothly, but that didn't translate to a peaceful marriage. Betty's digs about me not measuring up to Elizabeth intensified, and Eric never once intervened. It felt like no matter what I did, I would always be second best in their eyes. I bore the brunt of these comparisons out of love for Eric. Then, unexpectedly, Betty stopped mentioning Elizabeth, and Eric seemed more present. Things appeared to be improving until I stumbled upon texts between Eric and Elizabeth. The exchange was a shock to me, especially finding out through a message that popped up while I was about to charge Eric's phone. Confronted with the evidence, Eric was put on the spot. When I questioned him about why he told Elizabeth he was single, he prepared to explain, admitting it might sound foolish. This revelation was a turning point, challenging me to reflect on the respect, trust, and honesty fundamental to our relationship. It forced me to confront the reality of our situation and reevaluate what I deserved in a partnership, especially in light of Eric's actions and Betty's continuous undermining. It was a moment of clarity, understanding that love alone wasn't enough to sustain a marriage without mutual respect and support. Eric's reasoning left me speechless. He tried to justify his actions by claiming he merely wanted to gauge Elizabeth's response by falsely claiming he was single. To me, this logic was not only flawed, but deeply troubling, indicating a disregard for the sanctity of our marriage. His attempt to label the interaction as harmless only added insult to injury. He argued he was curious about Elizabeth's intentions, yet failed to consider the implications of his actions or how they would affect me and our relationship. Eric's response to my concern over a potential secret rendezvous was to dismiss it as jealousy, which only deepened my frustration. He didn't seem to grasp the impact of his mother's constant comparisons, nor how his ambiguous feelings about Elizabeth exacerbated my insecurity. His admission that he saw Elizabeth and me in different roles in his life was cold comfort, especially when followed by his ambivalence about meeting Elizabeth. His indecision struck a chord with me. It was clear that his actions were at odds with his assurances, underscoring a lack of commitment to our relationship. This realization was a bitter pill, highlighting that if he chose to meet Elizabeth, it would be a blatant disregard for our marriage and my feelings. In the heat of the moment, I was livid, struggling to contain my anger and disappointment. Eric's failure to defend me from his mother's comparisons was one thing, but his wavering loyalty when we were alone was even more disheartening. The thought of him lying to Elizabeth about his marital status and contemplating meeting her felt like a betrayal. For 2 weeks, I couldn't bring myself to speak to Eric, each glimpse of him reigniting my anger and sadness. I needed time to process my emotions without risking an overly emotional confrontation. When we finally spoke, Eric assured me he wouldn't meet Elizabeth. Yet, this assurance felt hollow, tainted by a sense of resentment on his part for being forced to choose. This episode left me questioning the foundation of our relationship, pondering the true depth of Eric's commitment, and whether mutual respect and trust could ever be fully restored. Exhausted by Eric's apparent indifference towards me, I initially overlooked my relief that he chose our marriage over rekindling anything with his ex. It took some time, but I eventually found my way back to feeling more like myself. Recognizing the critical juncture our relationship had reached, Eric and I committed to working through our issues, understanding that it was do or die for us. I believed we were both invested in making things work. When Thanksgiving rolled around, Betty, Eric's mother, extended an invitation to us, along with the rest of the family, for a grand feast at her place. Upon arrival, Betty's welcome was overshadowed by the presence of Elizabeth, Eric's ex, which caught me off guard. Betty explained Elizabeth as part of the family and mentioned she had nowhere else to spend Thanksgiving, a gesture that seemed generous but felt like a setup to me. Betty's indifference to my discomfort with Elizabeth, who had previously tried to disrupt my relationship with Eric, was frustrating. Her insistence on her right to host anyone she pleased, coupled with her dismissive attitude towards my feelings, was disheartening. Eric's attempt to placate me by suggesting Elizabeth had changed without considering my comfort only added to my unease. The situation escalated when Betty relegated me to the kids' table to avoid my negative energy affecting the main table, a move that felt both demeaning and isolating. Eric's failure to support me, deferring instead to his mother's wishes, left me feeling abandoned and humiliated. His willingness to catch up with Elizabeth, in light of my discomfort, and Betty's threat to exclude me from future gatherings if I protested, amplified the humiliation. Feeling betrayed and disrespected, I couldn't grasp why my feelings were so easily dismissed by Eric and his mother. The suggestion that I was overreacting, coupled with the directive to join the children's table, was a clear message of disregard for my feelings and dignity. This episode not only left me humiliated, but also deeply questioned the dynamics of my relationship with Eric and his family's influence over him. Feeling diminished to the role of a child, I couldn't understand why I was subjected to such demeaning treatment. Eric seemed oblivious, captivated by Elizabeth's presence, ignoring the evident pain in my expression. Betty's satisfaction at my expense was palpable, but I resolved not to let her see me cry. My tears would only validate her influence over me, a victory I refused to grant. So, with a heavy heart, I took my place among the children, trying to salvage some dignity. Surprisingly, the kids were a delightful company. Aged between 10 and 12, they were engaging and conversation flowed easily. Yet, my attempts to enjoy these interactions were marred by glimpses of Eric and Elizabeth together, their familiarity and laughter a stark contrast to my isolation. Elizabeth's closeness to Eric, visible even from a distance, gnawed at me. It felt like a blatant disregard for our marriage, especially given my uncomfortable seating arrangement. Seeking respite, I retreated to the kitchen for water, where I encountered Stephen, Eric's father. His confusion over my seating with the children opened a conversation about Betty's decision and my discomfort with Elizabeth's presence. Stephen's discomfort mirrored mine, revealing a shared sense of being out of place. His surprise at Betty's threat against me highlighted a family dynamic skewed by Betty's preferences. Stephen's disbelief at Betty's coldness towards me and his reassurance was a balm, even if momentarily. He recognized my value and contribution to the family, contrasting sharply with Betty's unwarranted comparisons. Our conversation revealed a side of the family dynamics previously unseen to me, shaded by Betty's influence and Stephen's often absence due to work. This exchange, albeit brief, offered a glimpse of understanding and support within the family, a rare find amidst the turmoil. It underscored the complexity of familial relations and the silent battles fought within, often unnoticed by those not directly involved. Feeling marginalized, the revelation that Betty had also intimidated Stephen into silence added another layer to the complex family dynamics I was navigating. Eric's reluctance to confront his mother, driven by a desire to avoid conflict, left me feeling increasingly isolated within the family. His approach, prioritizing peace over my well-being, raised serious doubts about our relationship's sustainability. Stephen's offer to intervene, despite my concerns that it might exacerbate the situation, highlighted a rare ally within the family. His suggestion to reassess my relationship with Eric was a wake-up call, emphasizing the importance of being valued and defended by a partner. The thought of starting anew was daunting, yet Stephen's perspective underscored the cost of my current compromise, my dignity and happiness. As the evening progressed, Stephen's unexpected decision to address the gathering marked a pivotal moment. Standing before the family, he expressed his gratitude for everyone present, but also voiced a deeper wish for inclusivity and kindness within the family dynamics. His acknowledgement of the unfair treatment I had endured under Betty's influence was both surprising and validating. This gesture of support from Stephen in a public setting challenged the status quo, offering a glimmer of hope that the cycle of disregard and disrespect might be broken. Stephen's announcement, while unexpected, was a profound reminder of the value of solidarity and advocacy within family relationships. It highlighted the potential for change, even in the most entrenched dynamics, and provided a moment of reflection on the importance of standing up for those who are marginalized. This act of defiance against Betty's treatment not only offered me a sense of validation, but also ignited a conversation about respect, acceptance, and the true meaning of family unity. As Stephen voiced his grievances, the tension in the room was palpable. Betty and Eric, visibly embarrassed by the public reprimand, could only listen as Stephen aired his disappointments. He pointed out Betty's inability to move past Eric's previous relationship and her role in making my experience with the family unbearably. Furthermore, Stephen criticized Eric for not standing up to Betty, accusing him of complicity in the toxic dynamics. The atmosphere reached a boiling point when Stephen announced his intention to divorce Betty, citing her behavior, and the negative impact on the family as his reasons. The revelation stunned everyone, including me. Betty's reaction was immediate and volatile, protesting the announcement on what was supposed to be a festive occasion. However, her pleas turned to desperation when Stephen stood firm in his decision. Stephen's disclosure of Betty's infidelity added another layer of shock. He explained how he had discovered Betty's betrayal through her secret meetings with an ex, a truth she had masked as innocent reunions with a co-worker and old friend. Stephen had concrete evidence but had chosen to remain silent until that moment, making his decision to leave even more definitive. Betty's subsequent breakdown only intensified the drama as she transitioned from outrage to despair, her pleas for reconciliation falling on deaf ears. Stephen's departure, coat in hand, left a heavy silence in his wake. The family, still processing the series of bombshells, was left in a state of disbelief. This pivotal moment not only exposed the deep fissures within the family but also highlighted the consequences of unchecked behavior and the profound impact of personal choices on others. After the tumultuous dinner, the evening unraveled quickly. Betty, humiliated by the revelations and the ensuing drama, withdrew, and the family gathering dispersed shortly after. Eric decided to stay with his mother, citing concerns for her well-being. His departure offered me the solitude I craved, a chance to reflect on everything that had transpired, especially Stephen's bold stance. Driving home alone, Stephen's courage and his advice resonated with me. If Stephen could end a long-standing marriage because he recognized his value, then I too had the strength to assert my worth. That realization brought me a sense of clarity and determination. For the first time in a long while, I felt a peaceful night's sleep, comforted by the knowledge that I was ready to pursue my well-being. Eric returned the following evening, visibly drained and seeking solace in sharing his tumultuous emotions. However, his focus on the chaos of his family's situation, rather than addressing our strained relationship, left me disconnected. His mention of Elizabeth's involvement in caring for Betty was the last straw. It crystallized my decision to end our marriage, a decision not made lightly, but as a result of continual neglect and disrespect. Eric's attempts to discuss his family's ordeal, including the shocking developments between his parents, felt irrelevant against the backdrop of our unresolved issues. His surprise at my request for a divorce, and his insistence on Elizabeth's innocence in our marital problems, only highlighted the chasm between us. Eric's promises to change and prioritize our relationship came too late. The trust and respect foundational to our bond had been eroded by his actions and inaction. His plea for a chance to mend our relationship couldn't erase the accumulation of hurt and disappointment. My decision was firm, driven by a desire for self-respect, and the realization that our marriage, marred by resentment and unmet needs, couldn't provide the support and love I sought. This moment of finality wasn't just about the end of a marriage, but about reclaiming my sense of self and embarking on a path toward healing and fulfillment. The unraveling of my 5-year relationship with Eric was both painful and illuminating. He questioned how I could end things so abruptly, seemingly oblivious to the depth of my hurt and the neglect I felt in favor of his past with Elizabeth. His failure to stand up for me, particularly at the Thanksgiving dinner where I was relegated to the kids' table, was a vivid symbol of his misplaced priorities. Eric's apologies, tinged with excuses about rekindling a connection with Elizabeth, only highlighted his lack of accountability for our marital discord. His attempt to shift the blame onto me for his decisions was the final straw. I had already made it clear that his actions would have consequences, and it was his choice to ignore them. His plea for another chance came too late. I had initiated the divorce process and was preparing to move on, physically and emotionally, by the end of the month. Surprisingly, Stephen, Eric's father, offered me support and refuge, a gesture that underscored our shared experiences of being marginalized by the people closest to us. My decision to stay with him was met with astonishment from Eric, revealing the depth of his disconnection from the emotional realities around him. Asserting my need for respect and autonomy from Eric was a bittersweet victory. While it was satisfying to stand up for myself, the reality of closing a significant chapter of my life was not without its pain. Yet, Eric's evident prioritization of Elizabeth over our marriage only reaffirmed my decision. Moving in with Stephen, we shared in the mutual process of healing, finding solace in candid conversations, comfort food, and films. This time also brought introspection and a slow reclaiming of happiness, despite occasional pangs of nostalgia for what I once shared with Eric. The decision to leave the town that harbored so many memories of us marked the beginning of a new chapter. Securing a promising job in another state, I embraced the opportunity for a fresh start, determined to rebuild and find fulfillment beyond the shadow of my past relationship. This journey, while fraught with challenges, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the possibility of finding strength in the aftermath of heartbreak. My gratitude goes out to those who listened and supported me through this transformative period, and I look forward to what the future holds with optimism and open arms.